Join Garage Woodworks League and build a through tenon bookcase and your woodworking skills. I decided I would make this table from some non-cherry species of lumber, and I decided to use walnut and maple. So let's go get some lumber. I've got some 8/4 lumber that I'm going to use for the legs, and I'm going to cut off about 1 inch or so off the end of this board, just in case there's any checking on the end of the board. With the 8/4 maple now down to a manageable size, I can cut the other set of blanks out at the table saw using my table saw sled. Before I take this over to the bandsaw and cut out my leg lengths, I'm just going to flatten one edge of the joiner. These legs are going to be 1 3/4 inches thick at their thickest, and then they're going to taper down as they go down to the floor. So I have the freshly edge jointed side of this leg blank towards me, and I'm going to reference off of this edge jointed side with the marking gauge. And I'm going to mark a line that's about 1/8 of an inch thicker than I actually need. Now this will give me plenty of material to square this leg blank up. Originally I was going to use my bandsaw to cut out these leg blanks, but I decided to use my table saw instead. So after ripping down my leg blanks to rough size, I'm going to let them rest for a few days so they can acclimate to my shop. With the legs squared and planed to thickness, it's time to start working on the rails, and I'm going to make those out of walnut. With the freshly edge jointed side up against the fence, I'm going to rip off the upper and lower rails for the table. So this board that I just cut the rough length is going to become the riser rails, and I'm going to get both riser rails out of this one chunk of wood. So the next thing I'm going to do is cut it to rough width. Now that I have all my rail stock cut to rough length and rough width, it's time to face joint one side and get it nice and flat, plane to the thickness, and then cut them to their final width. I could tell by the sound that the joiner was making as I was face jointing this piece that I was going to have a little bit of a hollow somewhere towards the middle. Now this chalk that I put on here really makes this evident. One more pass of the joiner should take care of that. So now that I have two nice and flat and parallel faces, I need to edge joint one side so that it's 90 degrees to one of the faces. Then I can cut these to their final width. I'm ready to cut all my rails to length, but before I do that, I'm going to square up one end. Up until now, the riser rails and the component that goes underneath the drawers have all been one piece to make ripping, face joining, and planing a lot easier. Now it's time to separate them into their two component pieces, one for each side. Before I can start laying out for the joiner, I need to cut these legs to length. So the first thing I'm going to do is cut one end square, and then I'll just batch them all off length. Before I mark out my joinery, I like to take all my legs and get them nice and flush on one end and then temporarily clamp them together and then just scratch a nice pencil line. For the joinery for this piece, I'm going to use floating or loose tenons. That means I need to make end grain mortises in all my rails, and I need to make the corresponding mortises in my legs. So let's make the mortises in the legs next. The lower rails are not as wide as the upper rails by about 1/2 inch, so I need to readjust my positive stops for the length of the mortise. I'm going to make the end grain mortises next and the rails that go underneath the drawer cases. Now if I reference off of the deck of the mortiser for both the end grain mortises and the rail, both pieces should be flush. For the joinery for the riser rails to the front rail and the rear rail, I'm going to use double floating tenons. And to get this right spacing in between the two mortises that I need for the floating tenons, I'm going to use a shim. Okay, so I made a minor, very fixable goof when I made one of the second mortises in the rail. And I went ahead and made the right mortise already, but I'll show you what I did wrong. After I removed the shim and I put the rail down, I put the wrong side up, and that resulted in a mortise that was too close to the first mortise. Had I put it in the right way and flipped the board over so that the other side is down, I would have had the mortise in the correct spot. No big deal. I'm just going to patch this incorrect mortise to make this wall a little stronger, and I think we'll be good to go. No one will ever know. And I'm just going to sink this right below the surface. There we go. The riser rails need to have a 2-inch diameter circle cut out on each corner on each end. I'm going to do that next after first tracing out a circle with a compass. I have 4 different sizes of my 1/4 inch thick loose tenons to make, and I'm going to make those next out of walnut. Next thing I need to do is round over these loose tenons with an 1/8 inch radius rounder bit. I like to mill my loose tenon stock so that it's just a little bit thicker than what I actually need. Then on a piece of sandpaper on a flat surface, I take it down to its final thickness. I'm only going to be removing a few thousandths of an inch from each side. I drew a taper onto the bottom of my legs, and I'm going to cut these out at the bandsaw. And as the bandsaw blade exits the top of the taper, it's going to leave a little bit of a nub at the top. So I'm going to get that with a hand plane, and then we'll clean up the rest of the taper at the joiner. I need to make screw holes in the rails that support the top to secure the top to the table. And I'm going to do that using 2 bits. I'm going to use a Forstner bit to drill down to recess the screw, and I'm going to use a regular drill bit to go all the way through. I've cut all the walnut for the drawer cases to rough length and to rough width. Now I just need to flatten one face, plane them to thickness, and then I'll glue them together and then finally cut them to their final size. I'm going to cut all these case pieces down to their final width, but I'm going to try to remove the same amount of material from each side to keep the glue line right in the middle. So with all the drawer case lumber prepped, it's time to make the joinery. And for that I'm going to use box joints. And to make the box joints I'm going to use my eye box. The backs of the drawer cases are going to go in a groove that go around all the way around the perimeter of the back of the drawer case. And to get those grooves, I'm going to use my router table with a 1/4 inch spiral bit. I didn't have enough walnut that was wide enough to make up the back for these drawer cases, so I had to glue up 2 pieces of walnut. I didn't bore you with that, so the next thing I need to do is make a rabbet all the way around the back so that it'll fit into the 1/4 inch groove that we made earlier. In the regular 4/4 maple bin at the lumberyard, I found some maple that had a lot of bird's eye character, so that's what I'm going to use for the drawer fronts. I have all the pieces cut to rough length that I need for the drawer sides and for the drawer fronts. The next thing I need to do is cut these guys to width and then face joint one side and plane them to thickness. I've got all my drawer parts cut to width, thickness, and length, and I'm ready to cut my half-blind dovetails. Now, I've done 2 practice hand-cut dovetails already, and I think they came out okay. So I'm going to show you how I cut my half-blind dovetails. This is not meant to be a tutorial on how to cut half-blind dovetails because I've only done it twice already. So let's get started. Far from perfect, but not too bad for only my third half-blind dovetail cut by hand. With all the dovetails finished, I need to make the grooves next to support the bottoms of the drawers. The backs of the drawers are going to be rabbeted into the sides, and I'm going to do that at the router table using a rabbeting bit. I found a really delicious looking piece of curly maple that I'm going to use for the top. I went ahead and cut it in half already. Now I'm just going to mill these two sections, four sides, and glue them together. The curly maple stock for the top overhangs my joiner by about 1/4 of an inch. So I'm going to use a combination of a hand plane and the joiner to get this board nice and flat. I'm going to cut the top down to its final width next, but I'm going to keep the glue line exactly in the center by cutting the same amount of material off of both sides. At the router table, I'm going to give the underside of the tabletop a 45-degree chamfer, and I'm going to do that in several passes to reduce the amount of chip out. With an 1/8 inch radius roundover bit, I'm just going to round over the top. For the drawer pulls, I'm going to make those out of walnut, and I'm going to make them at the drawer press. The first thing I need to do is cut out a couple blanks at the table saw. In order to make turning this round, I went ahead and knocked off the corners with a chisel. Just a light chamfer to the tops of the legs. So my wife didn't like the drawer pulls that I made the drawer press, so I pretty much have to start over. I attached the top with 6 screws that go through the riser rails. Now these screws will allow the top to expand and contract a little bit with changes in humidity with the changes in season. Well, I really hope you guys enjoyed this series. It certainly was a lot of fun. Now, as I mentioned in the first part of this series, the SketchUp file is available for download from my website for free, and you can go and download that, and you can get all the dimensions that you need if you wanted to build your own. Thanks for watching, guys. Oh, and if you're not already subscribed, I hope you'll consider subscribing to my channel. Thanks for watching, guys.